One of your particular areas of representation in the European Parliament is the spokesperson on foreign and defence affairs. Is that correct? Yes. Clearly we're living in momentous times in terms of the sort of financial markets, and there's very much a move led by Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister, to address those issues from a global perspective, to introduce global regulation in a way that hasn't actually happened before. What's the sort of European role going to be in that, did you see, from your fellow MEPs? Is there a sort of a coherent view on how to approach that, or is it something that it's going to take a little bit of time to bed down exactly what the sort of European attitude is going to be?
Well, firstly, my role in leading for Labour on foreign affairs, human rights as well as security enables me to really champion our Labour vision of Europe at the moment, which isn't about institutions, the treaty and all of that, important as those issues are, but to recognise that we've moved from a time when Europe has been inward looking, talking about the internal market, talking about the euro, talking about the institutional arrangements, to a future when Europe's principal role is going to be dealing with international affairs. How can we get strong agreements, as we have and must in Europe, on development, on climate change, that when, as Europe, we can sell to the globe? And that's why our foreign policy, and linking in development, trade and foreign policy to our Labour values, is quite so important. Now, you asked me about that in the context of the financial crisis. It is an absolutely critical dividing line between Labour and the Conservatives, because the Conservatives, you know, they went into their Tory party conference this year having opposed the nationalisation of Northern Rock and saying that we shouldn't buy shares as a government in private banks. The banks should be transferred to the Bank of England and sold off. Who would buy them in those circumstances? Who knows? But that was their policy. They've had a complete U-turn. But it demonstrates that they are so ideologically driven. And that ideology, which reveals itself most in relation to Europe, hard right-wing extremist views from David Cameron, from William Hague, this intention to withdraw from the European Conservative group in the European Parliament after the elections, shows that they are not equipped to negotiate with and win arguments with our European and international partners to take the clearly necessary international decisions that are needed to deal with the economic problems in the world. Banking supervision and regulation. It's necessary at the European and international level. We are regulating credit rating agencies, the people who got their sums wrong. We've required the banks to change the way that they report their finances so that they are more open, so that they are comparable between the different European countries, so that money that was off balance sheet is brought on and we can understand the real level of risk for each bank and its investments. And of course, Gordon Brown, the Labour government, but us as Labour MEPs have sold this idea as the key European and international response to the crisis, that we as governments guarantee interbank lending to get our banks lending again, to help people buy their homes and to help small businesses to get the credit they need to invest and to do their business. That's Britain winning the argument in Europe and in the world, Labour Britain doing it, the Labour government and Labour MEPs together, against a Tory party that has set itself and it's faced stolidly against that type of intervention, and that type of intervention at the international level. You couldn't get a clearer case for Europe.
Okay. On the defence side, one of the questions that comes up sometimes with people in relation to Europe is a suggestion that there's going to be some kind of Euro army. Is that something that you see coming ahead on the defence side of the European Union? That the French President Sarkozy, when he took over his presidency, said that he wanted to see a Europe for defence. It might well be that that's sort of taken the back seat to a Europe for finance for the rest of the French presidency. But is that kind of what's the sort of situation there? What's actually happening? People perhaps don't hear very much about it in Britain.
Well, it's enough to give a Eurosceptic Tory a nightmare, isn't it, to start talking about a European army. And the lead Tory MEP in this region here often says that to frighten the voters and to stoke up the prejudices of his supporters. And like so much else, it's a completely untrue Euro myth that only exists in the minds of Eurosceptics to try and turn people off Europe. Yes, let's frighten them again. There have been 20 military missions by EU troops with EU badges on EU uniforms, but does that mean there's a European army? No. What it means is that we cooperate together to do what I think no decent civilised person should ever oppose, which is what are known as the Petersburg tasks: humanitarian aid, rescuing people in situations of humanitarian crisis like the floods in Mozambique, going to countries, and I was there to see it, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that was shattered by civil war over so many years, and we sent European peacekeepers in to protect the vote when they had their first election to help end those years of conflict. That is a proper use of military resources that I do not, I repeat, think that anyone could oppose. And that's what the European Union is about in protecting security, what is often talked about not as security in traditional defence terms, but human security, providing that the hard side of that, peacekeeping, conflict prevention and resolution, alongside our efforts for development to help people to attack poverty and to develop fair and just lives for themselves. If the Tories want to oppose that, let them do it. Labour would never do such a thing.